and welcome to the Aid Station. I'm Chris Robb, and today it's a huge honor to be traveling to Boston in America to meet a real icon and legend of the industry in so many ways, Dave McGillivray, who is the race director of Boston Marathon, amongst many other hats he wears. He's an athlete, he's an entrepreneur, he's a philanthropist, an author, and an amazing inspirational speaker. Dave, great to see you again.
Hey, Chris, it's an honor. Thank you. I just think back to our days in Singapore with the Singapore Marathon, and a lot has happened since then. But it's great to be with you here today.
No, it's wonderful. And last time we caught up was probably 3 years ago at Running USA in Austin, and the industry was buoyant and there was so much happening, and who would know that we're where we are now. But why don't we start with a little bit of your background? You've got an amazing story. We could dedicate the whole 15, 20 minutes to your background, but give us a bit of a snapshot in 3 or 4 minutes, please.
Sure. Yeah, just quickly, for me, growing up in the Boston area, very sports-orientated town with all the professional teams, I wanted to be one thing when I was a kid growing up, and that was an athlete. But unfortunately for me, I was short in stature. I still am. And I always kept getting cut when I went out for the teams, or the last pick when my friends would pick sides. So it was really tough for me. And I learned, about one word in life, and that was rejection. To be rejected was emotionally devastating. And how do you overcome that? And so I started running because nobody can cut you from running. And then I just started leading a career in running. And I took a different path towards my passion of being an athlete. And then I ran the Boston Marathon when I was 17 years old. And I've run it every year since, 48 years in a row, and decided to run across the entire continent of America. So I ran from the West Coast to the East Coast. And when I got back, I opened up an athletic footwear and clothing store in my hometown. And I started putting on events to promote the store. And people would say, you really can earn a living putting on road races? And I said, well, that's not exactly what I'm doing. Well, what are you doing? I said, what I'm trying to do is raise the level of self-esteem and self-confidence of tens of thousands of people in this country. That's what I'm doing ultimately. And that's exactly what has happened over the last 40 years. So I put on over 1,300 events all over America, all over the world, and everything from working the Olympic Games to working in Singapore with you to working U.S. Olympic trials and Boston Marathon for 33 years. So, it's been a labor of love. I've followed my passion, and I have no regrets for that.
That's wonderful. And that's one of the common themes we were talking before we came on air is, we're over 80 editions of this now. And the theme that just keeps coming through is so many people in our industry working their passion, purpose-driven, making such an impact on society and people's lives. And obviously that's changed significantly. Tell us a little bit about what life's been like for you in Boston over the last few months and, what's currently happening there.
Well, Chris, like all of us in this industry, I really thought this was bulletproof. In good times, we're doing well in the industry, and in challenging times, we're doing well because people turn to themselves, their own health and fitness and social activity. And then along comes this pandemic in March. My company, DMSE Sports, we were set to have a record year. After 40 years of doing this, we had 35 events locked and loaded, ready to go. And then one by one, they just went over the cliff. And it felt like the boat was filling with water and we were feverishly trying to bail ourselves out. And, I wasn't sure where this was all heading. But for us, we have a can-do attitude. And we were saying, all right, maybe mass participatory events isn't going to happen anytime soon, so we have to pivot, and that's a popular word these days, pivot, and pivot into what? And so we started doing things like drive-in movies, we started doing virtual events, we started renting our equipment to restaurants for outdoor dining, whatever it took to keep a pulse, that's what we were doing. And it's interesting, this pandemic, I think about everyone impacted by it, God, the good people who passed as a result of the pandemic. But business-wise, what we do, Chris, flies right in the face of this pandemic. We get as many people as we can in a small space, all breathing on each other and sweating on each other. And we're being told, you can't do that anymore, at least for the time being, until things change. So that was a hit. And, for me, I've always been driven and motivated and always turned negatives into a positive. And this pandemic just turned everything upside down. And for some, it trashed everything, and others, there was some silver linings, and they were able to take advantage of some of the things that were going on. So here we are today, still trying to figure it out a little bit.
Yeah, and it's interesting. I mean, your catch cry, which I've heard many times, "My game, my rules," and it's kind of you're one of the most positive people I've met, and you're always inspirational and inspiring. And one of the things that you spoke about pivot there, you're starting to turn to your speaking. You've given, I think you said over 1,000 presentations already, but you're now looking at maybe that being kind of more of a professionally driven thing than just, speaking and helping people out and giving that kind of support. And of course, you're so community driven that I'm sure you'll do a bit of that. But tell us about that idea that you've got of becoming more of a professional speaker.
Well, over the years, having, done some athletic things, running across America twice, running up the East Coast of America, doing the Ironman triathlon 9 times, done the World Marathon Challenge, running 7 marathons, 7 days, 7 continents, and doing all these different things. There's a story there to tell. And so, I just did it as a way of giving back more than doing it professionally. And I've done over 1,900 appearances to every conceivable type of group you can imagine, from the elementary school kids to college groups to sales forces, corporations. I've been inside maximum security prisons and all over the place. And now with this pandemic, I'm starting to think, well, 2 things. One is maybe that's a way I can pivot a little bit. And 2 is I think this is the time people need to hear that story about overcoming obstacles and turning negatives into a positive, and never underestimating your own ability. So I'm trying to give a little bit more focus on professional speaking.
Fantastic. Well, all the best with that. And it's wonderful to be able to, as I do a bit myself, and it's pretty rewarding and just so great to be able to make an impact. And you're a person who's, you've shared some of those challenges that you've overcome, and those obviously come through in your speaking. But what for you have been 1 or 2 of the biggest challenges in dealing with the pandemic, Dave?
I always thought if I ever retired, I could keep really busy. And with this pandemic, it's basically shut almost everything down for me. And, I'm struggling a little bit as to how to keep busy, because it isn't like I can just walk away from my business and do things that have been on my bucket list, whether it's learn how to play the guitar or do something very different, because I need to continue to focus on bringing this business back. So the toughest part during this pandemic is decision making. Specifically, what direction do we go? For me, do I keep my employees, or do I lay them off? Do I just shut it all down and hibernate and wait till it all comes back? Do I cut my losses, or do I chip away, and do I continue doing something and keep a pulse? So trying to decide based on the incredible uncertainty of what's lies ahead is probably the toughest thing for those of us in this particular business. I have always specialized in large scale events like 5,000, 10,000, 20,000, 30,000. I mean, when are those coming back? And we have to think about the vaccine. We have to think about rapid testing. We have to think about mitigation. There's all kinds of moving parts here before we can safely bring these events back. They will come back, but it's just a question of when, and what do you do between now and then? And that's been probably the toughest challenge for me, to try to anticipate that and make the right decisions right now.
Yeah, a couple of the people I interviewed were Andrew Messick and Joe DeSena, and Joe DeSena reminded me of the death race that I think he used to put on, and he purposely kind of messed with people's minds. You'd start out thinking you were running one distance, and you'd move that distance, and you'd move the finish line. And Andrew Messick said, it's like, okay, I've been telling my staff you're in the final leg, it's the marathon, and you're just going towards the finish line, but that finish line just keeps moving. And many of us thought it would be the end of this year, and now is it mid next year or end of next year, and that's kind of never ending. But as a leader, how do you manage that? So you've got a team of people at DMSE, well respected people that have obviously been with you for many years. What are some of your kind of leadership principles and tips that you might be able to share with people that are listening around the world that are going through similar challenges at the moment, Dave?
That's a great question, Chris. You have to continue to be patient and to be positive. I haven't said anything to anyone about how I'm feeling until right now to you. And, sometimes with something like this, you feel vulnerable, and, it can be embarrassing when you thought that, that you could do anything, you could accomplish anything. We're invincible. Even as a runner, I've always felt that I've done all these different things, I'm invincible, but along comes certain challenges and you realize, maybe I'm not. And how do I overcome that? For me, standing at the starting line of the Boston Marathon, one of the most, if not the most prestigious marathon in the world, in front of 30,000 people, 1,200 members of the media, all over the place, how do you maintain your composure, your calmness? If something goes wrong, you have to be the person that is maintaining, a level of, like I said, that calmness, and for everyone else, you're doing it for them. So and you'll have to show a level of being in control. It was the same thing for me in the bombings in 2013. I couldn't panic, and, I had a job to do, right? And we had 6,500 people who were stopped that day, and they were all obviously nervous and anxious, and what do they do? And so you have to be there for them. You have to put yourself aside and say, I'm supposed to be the leader here, and I have to show leadership. And so for me, that's what's going on somewhat right now. As far as leadership skills, I believe you learn leadership skills in two ways. One is impeccable preparation, to be really prepared, because preparation equals confidence. Confidence is critical when you're at the top, or when you're the one having to make difficult decisions. And then, of course, experience in the field, having been there, done that, on the job training. So I think that's important to develop leadership skills. As to my advice for other people, I think it's more, I've always felt that my greatest skill set, mine anyways, is surrounding myself with people who are smarter than me, people who are as if not more experienced than me. You cannot do it alone. A good leader has a good team. And that's really where leadership skill sets come in. So I've always been trying to take right now, I'm trying to take the lead in trying to get race directors and industry leaders in my area in Massachusetts together to try to figure this out together, and go to government and say, hey, we want to develop a reopening plan for events here in our community. Every state in the US is different. They have different mitigation plans and just different things. So we have to figure it out for ourselves. And I'm trying to take a leadership role in that process.
Fantastic. And certainly that's one of the themes that's starting to come of late. I've been, as I shared with you, been doing these things over most of the pandemic now. And, the thing that really struck me very early on was this incredible collaboration that we're having across the world and across the industry. And what I'm now hearing, this theme is now that collaboration is looking to it really has to be localized. So we kind of started thinking, okay, we can lobby on a national basis and we can lobby on a state basis. But you're absolutely right. It's council by council and area by area. They've all got their different requirements and their different fears. I mean, hear stories, one of the well-quoted examples recently, the Noosa Triathlon in Australia, one of the biggest triathlons in the world, has a massive impact on a community. It had state approval at every level, but the local council had this fear that they were going to potentially impact some of their residents, and they didn't allow it to happen. So, I think that's one of the real big shifts that's happened in the last month or so, as people are saying we really have to engage locally, we have to work together locally. So, good on you for leading that, and all the very best in making that happen, because, I think one of the things that we're speaking about more and more, we just need as many case studies as we can to be able to show that we can do this successfully as an industry and build up that body of work to be able to say, look, it is safe to participate in these events without compromising. We don't want to take risks. We don't want people to get sick, but we've got to work together to try and find some solutions. Fantastic. Dave,
perfectly said, Chris.
Thank you. I always like to end on an inspirational note, and you're incredibly inspirational person. You've inspired so many people. You've seen so much inspiring in all those years. Is there one thing that stands out, one inspiring story that you'd like to end off with the people that are going to watch?
What's interesting, Chris, a lot of times, like you, we give these motivational talks, and you might talk about some of the things that you've accomplished in your life just to sort of set the stage and gain some credibility about what you're saying. And then sometimes people come up to me afterwards and say, hey, that was a great speech, but I feel like I've done nothing in my life compared to you. And I said, no, that's not what I was trying to do here. So sometimes showing my own vulnerability can be inspiring. So people say, hey, if he can, be vulnerable in that regard, if he can be impacted by this, then it validates other people's feelings, So for me, it came to life when I was diagnosed with severe coronary artery disease a few years ago. And like I said, I learned, at age 60, that just because you're fit doesn't mean you're healthy. And I always thought it did. And when I was first diagnosed, I turned to the doctor while I'm lying on the operating table, and I said, zip it up. He said, what do you mean? I said, don't tell anyone. He said, why? I said, because this is embarrassing. I'm supposed to be this picture of health, and I have severe coronary artery disease. And then I came to realize, that's pretty selfish, just to keep that in. I could help save lives by letting other people know that, that when you feel something, say something and save your own life. And that's what I'm feeling within this pandemic right now, too, is that, I can't just be selfish and be full of self-pity and, oh, woe is me, I lost all my business. I have to spin this around just the other way and basically say, hey, we can do this together. There are silver linings in all of this. More people are out running and biking and walking and getting fit. And when this does come back, we didn't lose our business. We were just told we have to stop it for a while until this pandemic goes away, and then the business will come right back again. So sort of to wrap it up, I think for me, the lesson learned is I've always believed that the comeback is always stronger than the setback. And such will be the case for all of us as we get through this together.
That's a wonderful saying. I've heard you say it a few times. The comeback will always be stronger than the setback. Wonderful way to end. Dave, so fantastic. We could have spoken for an hour. Great to see you again. I hope it's not too long before I see you on a start line somewhere or catch up socially somewhere. It's been wonderful to catch up again. Thanks so much.
Thanks so much, Chris. All right. You take care, bud.
You too.